This is the continuation of Rich Dad Conspiracy of the Rich, the 8 new rules of money. If you read The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you may recall the subtitles of the book was What the Rich Teach Their Kids About Money That the Poor and the Middle Class Do Not. For many people, reading my books was an apocalypse, a lifting of the evil, a disclosure of something hiding from the majority of humankind. In 1997, when Rich Dad and Poor Dad was the first released, it caused a whole of protest because it stated, your house is not an asset. A few years later, as the supreme mortgage was revealed, millions of people lost their homes, and people around the world lost trillions of dollars investing in subprime mortgages and other forms of toxic debt, partly caused by bankers creating the bulge money of the thin air. Rich Dad Poor Dad was not a book about real estate, as some would claim it was a book of financial knowledge, knowledge handed down from a father to a son. Name of the game is debt. In over simple terms, after 1971, money became debt, and for the economy to expand, you and I had to get into debt. That is why credit cards came in the email and home equity loans were available to people who had less stellar than credit. Technically, the money in your wallet is not money. It is an IOU, or money is debt. The reason the current financial crisis is so severe is because the bankers' rules of monopoly money allowed our biggest bank and the Wall Street package debts and sale into the world assets. According to Time magazine, from 2000 to 2007, America's biggest export was debt. What the smartest and brightest mind in the banking and investment world were doing was not much different than when a poor person refinanced his order or her home to pay off credit card. If we as people knew that our money was divulged, monopoly money, we might not be in the financial mess we are in today. If people had a financial education, there would be more than one person in a million who could diagnose our financial problem. If people had more financial education, they would not blindly believe that their house is an asset, that savings, money is smart, that diversification would protect them from risk, that investing for the long term in mutual funds is a smart way to invest. But our lack of financial education, the power that we are able to continue with their destructive monetary policies, it is to their benefits that you and I are in the dark. This is why the rich had to first take over educational system before they could flood the world with debt. This is why our school do not teach us about money. Rather comment. In the reading this in reading this, I am reminded of what Henry Ford said about the Great Depression of the 1930s, and I paraphrase that he was afraid that it might not last long enough because these countrymen would not have had the time to learn from it. Kochu Rapik. Murals of money. Number 2. Learn how to use debt. Many people teach that debt is bad or evil. They had preached that it is smart to pay off your debt and to stay out of debt, and to an extent they are right. There is good debt and bad debt. It is wise to pay off bad debt or not get into bad debt to begin with. Simply said, bad debt takes money out of your pocket, and good debt puts money into your pocket. A credit card is a bad debt because people used to buy depreciating items like big screen television. A loan for an investment property that you rent out is good debt. If the asset's cash flow covers the debt's payment and put money into your pocket. Reader's comment. This is the key concept of getting rich. This is the key. I do not pretend to be any great business person. I own a clinic and I am practicing professional. I operate mostly from the S quadrant, but I'm slowly increasing by my B quadrant. In terms of income and knowledge, I have learned firsthand how to piece of medical equipment can become a fabulous asset, even though it is a financial with debt. G.R.G. Locke. The people who preach the evils of debt do not understand that debt is essential to the American economy. Whether that is good or bad is debatable. What is not debatable is that without debt, our entire economy would collapse. That is why our government is issuing record numbers of bonds to raise money. That is why it is engaging of deficit spending like never before. The government's greatest fear is deflation, and the one way to go combat deflation is by inflation. And the one way to create inflation is by debt. I know President Obama promises change and hope, but given his choices of Tim Geithner as Treasury Secretary and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers as head of the Nine Nation Economic Council. And the people who accelerated this crisis during President Clinton administration, nothing is going to change if you and I do not get back into debt. If you and I stop borrowing and the banks stop lending, there will be a crash and probably a depression. The reason a prolonged credit freeze would lead to a depression is because the economy now grows by you and me getting into debt, not by God's produce. In 2003, President George W. Bush said, "It is in our national interest that many more people own their own home." Obviously, he was encouraging the virtues of home ownership because he wanted more people to get into debt and save the economy. You may notice that today, when the bankrupts foreclose on property, they do not want the house. Homes are not assets. You, the asset, or rather your ability to pay the interest on the loan is the asset. Of course, living by the sword of debt also means dying by the swords of debt. By 27, no, but by 2007, as the overwhelming mountain of credit card debt and home equity debt reached its peak, the United States and the world could not absorb any more debt. Today, millions of people are finding out why in 1997, in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I stated, your home is not an asset. In gold, we trust. In 1957, the word in God we trust were added to the US dollar bill. In 1971, the dollar was severed from gold, according to a recent piece of Vanity Fair. The purchasing power of the dollar was dropped by 87%. As stated earlier, all fiat currencies, government-sponsored monopoly money have eventually gone to their true value, zero. In 1970, $1,000 would have bought approximately a 28 ounce of gold. By March 2009, with a gold approximately $900 an ounce, and those 28 ounces of gold could be sold for around $25,000, even after the largest stock market crash in history. In 1924, John Maynard Keynes, who warned against the debauching of money, dismissed gold as a barbarous relic. Unfortunately, he did not realize how much the Federal Reserve and our government could debauch our currency, and once the rules of money were changed in 1971, in 1971. In 1952, the ratio of the household debt to disposal income was less than 40%. In other words, if you had $1,000 after taxes, only 400 went into debt. By 2007, it was 133%. Since the wages were not going up, people were living on credit cards and home equity loans. Today, Americans carry over $1.56 trillion in consumers' debt. Even our brightest bankers fell for the ruse. In 1980, bank debt was around 21% of total output of the United States GDP. By 2007, it was 116%. In 2004, the Securities Exchange Commission allowed the top banks to print as much money as they needed to by dissolving the reserve limit of 12 to 1 just to save the economy. A reserve limit of 1 to 2 means for every dollar in the bank's account, the bank can lend out $12 in debt by allowing the top 5 banks to dissolve the 12 to 1 reserve limit. The bank could now effectively print money at will, against as the rules of monopoly state. The bank never goes broke. If the bank runs out of money, it may issue as much money as may be needed by merely writing on any ordinary piece of paper. Unfortunately, allowing the biggest bank to print nearly unlimited amounts of money did not save the economy. It only made the problem worse. New rules of money. Number 3. Learn to control cash flow. If you want to be financially secure and possibly rich, you need to know how to control your personal cash flow as well as monitor the global flow jobs, people money. Running money. The reason I wrote about the fruits of vendors in Vietnam earlier in this chapter was to emphasize the relation between money and running during economic crisis. On March 2, 2009, the Dow fell 299 points to 6,763, down from a high of 14,164 points on October 9, 2007. In very simple terms, this meant that money was running out of stock market. Just as the fruit vendor was getting ready to run by exchanging her piasters and dollars for gold. In 2009, using my dad's words, cash is flowing out of stocks market. The question is, where is the money flowing? The most important words in business and investing are cash flow. That is why the educational game I developed is called cash flow. One of the most important things my rich dad taught me to do is control my personal cash flow and monitor the world's cash flows. He taught me that to monitor global cash flow by observing three things. Jobs. Number one, jobs. 4 years, jobs have been flowing overseas today. In America, jobs are flowing out of Detroit as General Motors collapses. That means Detroit's economy is suffering. Number two, people just as that Vietnam woman was running. People today are running. They run towards areas where the jobs are. I like to invest in markets where people are moving to, not from. Number three, cash. The same Vietnamese woman wanted that money was global. That is why she exchanged her piasters and dollar for gold. The same happened today. The stock market is crashing because cash is flowing out of equities into savings, matrices, bonds, and golds. Debt, money, cash flow. Learning how to use debt in one of the most important skills persons can learn. And the important lesson is that the debt is only as good as your cash flow. If I run educational system, I would teach a student the difference between good debt and bad debt, and how to use good debts to make cash flow into their bank accounts, rather than throw out their bank's account. To use good debt effectively requires financial IQ. Since our money is not debt, teaching people to use debts wisely would make our economy stronger. In my book, Rich Dad Increases Your Financial IQ, I go into make details on how I use debt with low risk and very high returns. Even as the economy collapsed today, my investments with debt continue to have a positive cash flow. One reason my investment remain stronger is because my partner and I buy apartment house where the jobs are, in areas where people and money are flowing. In simple terms, real estate is not worth as much if there are no jobs, because jobs attract people and where people are flowing, cash is flowing. Reader comment. What is the most surprising, though, is that I learned nothing about cash flow in advance. Accounting and finance classes are while earning a master's in business administration. Wouldn't you think it would be something they would teach? I learned how to figure out the numbers and where to place them when you are trying to keep track. They do not teach as I teach the significance of cash flow in building or creating wealth. They are empirical. Hope versus education. Rather than hope that President Obama will save the world, I believe it is more intelligent to become smarter with our money. Since the first new rule of money is knowledge. Your knowledge of money must include learning to use steps and learning to control your personal cash flows, as well as monitoring the cash flows of jobs, people, and money through the world. I created cash flow boarding game to teach the skills of taking control of your personal cash flow and using debt to have cash flow in your bank account, not out of it. Cash flow has been called monopoly on steroids. Cash flow for kids, for children ages 5 to 12. Rather than use words and numbers, cash flow for kids use colors and pictures to teach children basic fundamentals about money and cash flow and how to use them wisely. Cash Flow 101, the fundamentals of investing. These games teach the difference between assets and liabilities and using debts wisely. It combines accounting principles with investing peoples. You can find out more about games from website of richdad.com. There are also thousands of cash flow clubs all over the world where you can learn how to play the game for free or low cost. Cash flow clubs are created to increase financial IQ and are asked to adhere the principles of Rich Dad's company. If there is any club in your area and you may want to start your own club because teaching is one of the best way of learning. In conclusion, finally, always remember the bank never goes broke, but you and I can. But there is a good news. There is a good news. A bank can print its own money, and so you can, and I. In later chapter, I will show you how I print my own money because using financial intelligence, often using debt, and controlling cash flows. Chapter 4: The Conspiracy Against Our Wealth.